So here's what happened with Ananias and Saphira and why it happened. It followed the patterns that God had laid down. It followed the patterns that God had laid down. The first thing to recognize is that from the first moments of the inception of the body of followers of Christ, believers were not perfect. And they didn't become perfect. There is nothing here to indicate that Ananias and Saphira's actions were those of pretenders, but they were weak believers. Second, just as with Achan in the book of Joshua, Ananias and Saphira held back for themselves some of what now belonged to God. Why did the proceeds of the sale of their own property belong to God? Because they had made a show of selling their property and giving it all to the believers' community. They'd made a vow. But instead of following through, they falsely reported the selling price and then gave that lesser amount to the disciples, keeping the rest of it for themselves. It was a deception that was designed to make them look good in front of everybody. The Deuteronomy 23 passage we read says that no one's required to make a vow. It's strictly up to the individual. But if you do, once that vow is made, God will hold us to it. Yeshua speaks about vow making in this way, in Matthew 5:33 through 37. Again, you have heard that our fathers were told, do not break your oath and keep your vows, to Adonai. I tell you, don't swear at all. Not by heaven, because it's God's throne. Not by earth, because it's his footstool. Not by Jerusalem, because it's the city of the great king. And don't swear by your head, because you can't make a single hair white or black. Just let your yes be a simple yes, your no a simple no. Anything more than this has its origin in evil. Ananias and Saphira should have heeded their master, Yeshua. They had no need to vow to sell property and give it all to the believers' community. Peter says in verse 4, Acts 5, before you sold it, the property was yours. After you sold it, the money was yours to use it as you please. Ananias and Saphira did nothing wrong in selling property and giving however much or little of it they preferred to the disciples. What they did would have been simple charity. What they did wrong was to turn voluntary charity into a sacred vow to give it to their fellow believers. The instant they did that, the proceeds of that sale belonged to God as his holy property. Ananias and Saphira transferred ownership to the Lord, whether they realized it or not. And then they took some of what was now God's holy property for themselves. That's what happened. This is a lesson for us in modern times. Making a vow to God is a serious matter. It was then, it remains so today. I'm not saying that if you break your vow that God's going to surely kill you. But he did choose to kill Ananias and Saphira. And Jesus, knowing the hardness of our hearts, including the hearts of believers, strongly warned us to simply make our yes, yes, our no, no, without invoking a vow in the name of the Lord. Because then it changes the entire equation into something holy and therefore dangerous. So what did God intend to accomplish with these dramatic deaths of the blasphemers, Ananias and Saphira, beyond divine justice? Verse 11 gives us the answer. As a result of this, great fear came over the whole Messianic community and even over everyone who heard about it. I think if we're honest, we see a little bit of Ananias and Saphira in ourselves. Who among us has made a promise in our heart to do something righteous or to not do something selfish or bad, and either changed our minds or just forgotten all about it? Or even more, we've directed a prayer towards God that if he'd do thus and so for us, then we'd respond by doing thus and so for him, and he did his part. But we didn't follow through with our part. Besides, no matter how we look at the God principles involved with their deaths, doesn't it seem in our natural sense, just our natural selves, a sense of fairness, that receiving the death penalty for not turning over 100% of the proceeds of the sale of their own property to the believing community was pretty extreme? See, I have little doubt that the believers back then who witnessed and heard of this event truly understood. They understood the God principles about what happened to Ananias and Saphira. Yet, as F.F. Bruce says in his commentary on the book of Acts, the fear which fell on the whole community suggests that many a member of it, like many an Israelite when Achan was exposed, had reason to tremble and think to themselves, "There but for the grace of God go I." Amen to that. The Holy Scriptures are there to inform and to inspire and to warn. So for those who still haven't been convinced just yet that God's laws and commandments from the Hebrew Bible are every bit as relevant for us and that we are to obey them, as are the instructions to us from Christ and his disciples in the New Testament, let the horrific deaths of Ananias and Saphira, followers of Christ, be a lesson. Fear God. Fear God.